Hello everyone, this is Guyan with Genome Studios here for another intensive, C++ in this case, and finally the first one where we're going to actually do some programming. So if you're here from the setup video last, welcome back, and if you're here to learn about gems and beyond, welcome. So, what is a gem? That's the big question, and that's one of the big sells about O3DE. Gems are basically modules or packages that you can enable and disable by toggling to basically just immediately install the functionality and features and systems that are within any given gem. If you go into the gems library, there is all sorts of built-in stuff for, well, the whole engine as you know it. And it is open to be added to. You can make your own gems, you can add gems from a repository and all sorts of things. But, you know, until you start working with it, you don't really understand necessarily what these are. So we're going to get started by just making ourselves a gem. That's a pretty good one. So we're going to go here and we can create new gem. So we'll create it. And just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to do the default gem template and click next. It's going to ask me things. Intensive gem, intensives gem, intensives gem. Maybe I do the space. We'll see. Gem summary, gem for intensives. No, whatever. Requirements, you don't need any. I've never known quite what those do. Licenses, free. License URL, you can add that. Gem tags, I think those are just, yeah, just a filter. It's fine. Gem location. So I hope that you have set up a working folder for development, and you have your own gems development folder. Inside the folder, you can just create gem after gem after gem and know where they are and that you can develop with them. So we're going to select this folder and leave everything else to be done. So we click, oop. Oh, I see, we have to just make the folder this way. Intensives gem. I don't know, I like doing it short case. All right, creator name, Genome Studios, Inc. Your website and the repository for the gem, all those things. And now you have one. So you can go intensives gem, here we go. And we've got it. We've got it here. So we've created a gem, and now we can go into our project and configure it. And intensives gem, and add that. This one here, Intensive 2025, is actually the project. We'll cover that right away here. So we added the gem. Probably needs to be rebuilt because we've just added a bunch of stuff that needs to go into the editor. So now we're going to open up our IDE. Use the one you're most comfortable with. I'm going to be using the one I set up in my former tutorial. And the most ideal thing, regardless of what you're using, is that you have your project included, you have your gems folder that I just told you to make, and you have the folder to the O3DE source code that you've gotten off of the GitHub repository. So we just created a gem and we just added it. So we can go into our project and look at project.json, and we will see intensive gems version 1.0. So we know it's now in our project, and that's good. And now we can look into the gems folder and we should find intensives gem. So here we go. We've got our gem. And again, to the simplicity of a gem, it's basically just a folder that has the stuff inside that you just toggle on and toggle off. So a default gem has, preview to display. It has its gem information, some stuff that comes to for compiling and building, and then just kind of a default setup. Assets for if you are creating assets, the code, which is where we're going to mostly be, the registry for using setregs files, which are configurations that run when you do stuff in the program. And a fun thing is that in what I said earlier about the project being a gem, if you go into the project, you can just open the gem here, and it's got a gem.json, it's got source code here, and it's got exactly the stuff that we have here. So funny enough, a project is just another kind of gem, or at least it's got a lot of gem in it, and we're just adding more. So the anatomy of a gem. There are lots of, kind of things going on with a gem that's required so that, when you toggle it, all sorts of machinations within the engine bring it in, make it appear in the editor. You can use the things, configure the things, add things, remove things. And it can be really, really vexing when you don't understand why anything is happening. So I'm going to go stage by stage, and we're going to find out kind of broad-reaching things, work our way to more specifics, and then I'll introduce you to some things that are going to be necessary as we move forward in later tutorials. So like I said, the code is here, but the gem really starts at the gem.json. Here is where you describe everything about it. This is the gem name that we inputted. You can change the version. The display name is the intensive space gem, which allows you to have it look nice here. Apache 2.0 is what O3DE is, which is basically public domain for software. You can point to Apache 2.0. All these things. It's type code. I think it's just what you search in the filter. We've got our summary, tags is the name, platforms, just what they're compatible with. Requirements, documentation, dependencies, these are all configurable things. I think if we go into, oh good, I think it's fine. If you add requirements, it will give you a warning little descriptor over here in the additional information, but we're fine. Everything is clear, and restricted just means don't make another gem called intensives gem because it's going to cause a lot of trouble. So this is really the big meta stuff. It's very simple. You're rarely going to be using too much about it, but this is the beginning. This is what the editor looks at to go, okay, this is a gem, and the contents within here are the contents of this gem. But like I said, the mass of the work is going to be done in code because you are trying to program in C++. So let's look at our schedule here. Yeah. So the biggest thing, and it's very, very confusing, and I haven't even gotten to the bottom of it, is the code cmake lists.txt. This one governs everything in your source code, all of these things, and is one of the most crucial aspects of making program-based gems. If we look at the cmake lists of the meta of the full gem, it just says look at code pretty well. So we're looking at code, and now we've got this, a very, very different picture. So what are we looking at? A lot of garbled jargon that I just go along with. There's lots of instructions that talk about what these things are and how they work. We're defining things and making symbols and signals and stuff for things. But we get to the lie add target. So what these are basically when you build your gem, when the editor, when O3DE goes, hey, we're going to make this gem part of the everything, it makes all of these various targets. And basically, to my understanding, they're .dll files. So DLLs just contain software knowledge inside of them. And now we're saying there's one called gemname API, gemname private object static, gemname pal trait monolithic driven module type, and more. So let's make some sense out of this at first. The way that the engine developers view the way that this works is API is a thing where outside of the world it looks at our gem and goes, I want to run things or I want to do things using it. So API just has the switches and the buttons and the dials that just say, do the gem work. Then we have the private object static. And as the name private suggests, this is the stuff inside the gem that outside of the gem doesn't find out about. These are the guts that you'll use to do the complicated systems things. And then this one actually turns out to be gemname. And it is shared, as you can see here, shared. And I'm not exactly sure if it means truly public or if there's a way to interface with it that is definitely more revealed than the private. So what happens is that, like you see here on these, this AZ core and AZ framework and stuff are basically just gems in their own right. They're part of the source code, like engine code, but they act as such. And it very much exposes how this works. These packages become little labels just like this. You can see it here, gem intensive gem.api and gem intensive gems private object. So what's actually being described is intensive gem by name is actually giving us the public API and it's running the private stuff behind the scenes, public, private. But we're saying that these are a dependency when we're building this package, this DLL. I call them packages. So when you're using other gems, maybe you're in your gem folder of your project or you're doing different gems for different features. If you need to use one of these for other things, you'll likely target one or more of these. The shared obviously trying to give you just kind of all of it. And by doing this, you can hide as much of the systems behind closed doors, expose whatever you want people to be able to point at and say, do this thing, and other things that the engine needs to connect with things. I haven't quite used it this way, but this is the general way to do it, and I can show you how to do it from there. So the next thing is that we're defining a few things, just saying that the gem name is gem name and that we're using this module file. I'll talk about that later. And then that clients, servers, and unified builds are going to be using gem name. So they're already doing it. They're basically saying use this gem for our client builds, server builds, unified builds. And then similarly, for clients API builds and servers API builds and unified API builds, use the gem name API, which is this one up here. These happen to be the way that the final runtime, the release projects pick up the software of this gem, but the editor does something slightly different. we add the variant dependencies. I'm not sure exactly this. You don't need to change it. It's just saying gem name and the client server and unified are happening. But now we go to paltrait build host tools. And tools are the editor. So as we'll see, we're going to find an exact duplicate of interface, private, and shared, but an editor version. So editor API, editor private object, and gem name editor, and it's using editor shared. And you'll see that exactly like the other shared, it's using the editor API and editor private objects. Interestingly, you'll see in the private that it's using the non-editor private, and in the API, oh, it's not even using the non-API. Great. So then it doesn't even use it. So what does this mean? Well, within this if, the editor says, okay, yeah, we're if. It then points to a editor module, which I'll get to later, and then defines these later builds, tools and builders. So these are the things that are building stuff and the tools, so everything in the editor basically. And so as you see, they use the gem name editor versions of the things, again, both the API equivalents and the singulars, and then says that they're the variants, the tools builders are these. So then, perfect to the way that engineers think and work, we now hit the tests packages. And this I don't do. The editor stuff is already very far, but we have a tests equivalent. If you're building this for testing, run these test things. But I'm an indie developer, I do gameplay stuff, I'm not going to be running tests. So first thing you can do is just axe all of that. So now we see the end if here, which relates to the editor if. So now, now that we understand these packages a little bit, we can say there's a game version of your gem. There's an editable editor version of your gem. And even there's software engineer testing protocol run through automated systems testing version of your gem. Now, depending on how complicated you want your gem to be, you can flat out just take these and put them here with these guys here. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to build that. Paste them here. So now we're saying we've got all these guys. Now we're going tools and builders, and we're just removing the editor here and removing the editor here, and then adding tools and builders. So what we're doing here, and again, you'll learn this over time as you build gems and stuff and as you need more complicated use. What we're actually doing is just saying, if we're building the engine, the editor, just point to the game gems, the game gem side. Lots of things that don't need editing, like tooling, like you don't need to run a thing or open a window or check if the editor has clicked, whatever. You're just doing gameplay. When I click spacebar, the guy jumps, and the guy is only going to exist in the game world. You don't really need to worry about having all the editor equivalents here. But just for the sake of me doing these tutorials into the future, I'm going to preserve this. Yes, good. And now we're going to continue on understanding in some part that we have for this gem, we have our game side gem and we have our editor side gem. And so as we develop and of course go to the editor, like run the editor to see the outcomes of our programming, we have to understand that we're looking at game versions of things through the eye of the editor version of our tool, of our gem. So issues can come up here and in these places that you may not be able to discern is either editor problems or the game side problems, but just trust in this case that they're going to both impact how things go. So I'm going to click save because we do not need testing. So as a continuation from, we're not going to cover testing for this tutorial, we're going to go to tests folder here and we're going to delete it. And then we're going to go and we're going to find editor tests and just tests. And we're going to delete those. I'm going to quickly look, of course. So we've defined these packages that the grand world of the O3DE engine and the game that you're going to release to Steam comes through these targets. But now what do these targets actually use, or what are they pointing us towards? And this becomes a little bit more the actual fun programming side of things. All of these targets, API interface, private object static, uses intensivegem.api.files, intensivegem.private.files, intensivegem shared files, editor API, editor private, editor shared, etc., etc. Right? That's all these. We deleted the testing ones, but we have intensivegem API and editor API and private and editor private and editor shared. You can usually tell because there's an editor in the name at some point. Editor shared, we've got private files, which have a little bit more stuff, shared files, which have some stuff. So what is this doing? Well, this is basically just your catalog, your like endless massive list of all of the programming source code that you have in your game. So intensive gem bus and intensive gem ID are API files. So over here, this API interface is saying, when you're just kind of looking at the surface level of our gem, you're going to be seeing these. You won't know anything about them right now, but this is how it's kind of breaking down. The private object static, we go to intensive gem private. We have the module interface. We have gem system component. All of these complicated things. We were talking about the modules over here, gem module. So that's how these things can exist. They exist here in these folders, or these collections of data of the source code. So this is a lot of what a gem is. So you're going from the outside in. You're looking at just the general info about the gem. Then you're finding all of the things. This is how you build the project. So we're just extracting all the functionality from these. Then we're saying this is what the functionality is that you're extracting. And then in this code is going to be the programming. So very quickly, before we get into looking at the programming side of things, in the code base, there are two folders, include and source. Include is meant to be an outward facing folder. And inside of it, it just literally has the exact same name as your gem, intensive gem. And what this means is when you go into these packages again, interface is including the include folder. Private object is including the include folder. What this means is when you're making a private file, intensive gem system component, let's look at it. Go to source, because this is where the actual programming is. Source clients, intensive gem system component. When we click on it, it has this include here. We're going to get back to this, but it has this include here, and it says intensives gem, and then gembus. We were talking about it earlier. The thing here is that this is actually saying inside include. It's saying D slash dev slash gems slash intensive slash code slash whatever include. And now we're stepping into intensive's gem here, intensive's gem bus. So the reason why we can do this without what I just did, the enormous chain of things, is because we're including include. So now when we just do the blah blah dot cpp, we're saying look into include, and if you find blah 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 dot cpp, and what's going to actually happen is all of these various include directories will make the same thing happen. If blah blah dot cpp isn't in include, it's going to just check source, and then okay, source has it. Source this folder. So we can see it again. We can see it again reflected in our private files. We have the source ones, and I think it's an API. No, it's shared. No, we'll go to API. There's the include intensives gem. And so even here, we have to still tell it that include counts. And that's because our Cmake lists here is in the same level. Here we go. Our Cmake lists, this one, and these folders are right beside the include. So then we still have to say, okay, go beside me to the include, look in intensives gem folder, and you'll find this source code. So we're stepping from the outside in. We've now defined these things. We've given ourselves some shortcuts that allow us to do things. And what these shortcuts also show us is that in other gems like AZ Core, they have a similar format, because here we are finding AZ Core, and inside AZ Core is probably the AZ Core from includes component, and inside the component folder is component H. And we can find this out. We can hover over component. Oh, we can hover over. Is it gonna? Well, we can click F12, and we'll step into it. Because you have your source code here in your Explorer, it's actually going to bring you to where this is. And this is source code. We're looking at the engine, like literally how the engine works. And we can look in here. There's an AZ Core folder, and then there's an AZ Core folder inside of it. And all of a sudden we're seeing component like we would if we go AZ Core asset, AZ Core jobs, AZ Core socket, that's a fun one to say, utils, XML, we've got AZ Core linking in the same way that we do our gem. So if you take your gem, one of these guys, and bring it over to a project or over to some other gem code, you can literally, if you've included it here, within the build dependencies and whatever, you'll be able to say intensives gem and be able to access your gem from outside. So we now have our gem. We have the thing that gives the gem to the system to actually use. We know what the gem files are, but there's one last thing to the gem system that defines a gem and its existence. And actually, I accidentally clicked here, but it's the module. So separate from all of these packages and stuff, we're saying that the gameplay the gameplay module is Intensive's gem module, and we're saying that the editor module is Intensive's gem editor module. Again, we're not necessarily right now talking about editor things, but there's always going to be a mirrored thing to these more absolute systems of how the gem works. So let's actually look at the gem module. We have here in the source code, there's a gem module interface H, and then there's gem module interface CPP. And in this CPP is actually more what we use in the day by day, when you're programming, when you're making components, when you're doing stuff. The only way for the editor to know your source code is stuff to bring into the actual editor software, add a component, make a input bindings file, like all of that comes from the module. So we see here, oops, don't click that. We have the reference to module interface header. If you know C++, there's almost always a header that gives you just the outward kind of framing, and then the CPP, which is the guts that actually run this is the address on your house, and this is the inside of your house, is the factory. So what are we seeing here? We're including our gem type IDs. We're including our gem system component. We were looking at that earlier. So why? Why are we doing this? When the editor loads, it says, okay, create the module interface for the gem, because I'm going to use it to understand what's inside you. So this is just a class like every other software class in the thing. It's of type gem module interface intensives, and this is the constructor, which is just the same name. But what is it now doing when we create it? So the editor launches, it goes, oh, we have intensive gem enabled with the little switch. Create the module, because we need to know what's happening. So all of this is going to say, in this insert, it's just a big list called descriptors. You're just going to basically copy, add all of your components that you make like this. All the components have what's called create descriptor, and the descriptor is the thing saying, all right, editor, my icon is this, my naming is this, I can only be put on a camera, yada, 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 all of those things. So what we're seeing in this default is that we have a Intensive's gem system component. So a system component that's meant to effectively represent the gem, the entirety of the gem itself. So this is where you do big, broad, general things that usually manage the operation of your the rest of your gem. This is the thing that makes it so that it's a system component. I will get into that with future tutorials, but all it is that system components have a little special thing, which is you can't put them on something in the editor. They just get launched in the editor and in the runtime game, and just they're up in the clouds in the sky above what you can ever see, but they're there listening and waiting for programming to happen. So let's just step into it real quick, because very likely all your gems are going to have this system component. It is just a component. This is what all the components likely are going to be. It has a gem request bus. If you've been using O3DE, these are the events system, but in programming. If you don't know about that yet, we're going to cover that in the future. And then it has a tick bus. So all the software you know, usually for video games, has tick or update or fixed update or I don't even know what other frame, I don't know if that's a thing. But tick is we've run the game through. Now we're starting again at the beginning of the program, running the game through over and over and over. And that means that characters can move, windows can open. It represents time passing for the video game and the software operation. When we look down here, there's constructor and destructor. These things, reflect and yada, 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 all come from the component. So does init, activate, and deactivate. These are those common component things where you start up, you toggle on and off things. And then the onTick, which is when you're looking at onTick, it's going to go tick, 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 give you information that you want to have. And this is our entire gem system component. You, in the future, if you're doing software, programming and need a global master that's floating in the sky to do stuff, you can do stuff here, and then you can get into the guts and make it actually do the stuff. I'm going to get into the details of this in the future tutorial, but components and many, 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 many classes in the O3DE systems have what's called reflect. And the reflect is what every little component, every piece of the components do when they're getting the descriptors. So you can have software, your classes, your components and stuff, but if you don't reflect it, the engine isn't going to have anything to show you. So there's always a little workflow for how you're going to introduce components and all sorts of classes and systems, but the general flow of it is you have your gem. If you want to do a completely different feature set, akin to what landscape, you want to do a landscape system. You don't want it to be built into your character controller system. That's madness. So you can make a different gem. You make the gem. You come in here. You point the things to the things you want. So you could be doing gem, landscape canvas, so that you can use landscape canvas tech. You might do if there's an API one. But so your private object stuff, you can put it in here so that all of these programs, your system component and all these things can look at it. You may not need it. Likely for your beginning gems, you won't need to do that. But this is the first stage of the process. Then you have all of your files lists, and you can then start working from there. Add the component, set up its logic, add it to the files, add it to the module interface, save. We'll go here, F7 build. So then you run your build. Now that we have this new gem, it now has to review all of the things. You're going to build. Once that's successful, you can run, and we'll end the tutorial with that, hopefully. I hope this doesn't take an enormous amount of time. We'll see. If you're coming from Visual Studio and just default settings, you might not be getting the same messages like this. As part of my introductory tutorial here, I set up Visual Studio Code with Ninja, a different builder, which I think has nicer logs, and it gets to your code faster, so it fails faster, so you don't have to sit here and watch this window go for hours and then fail. You can just see it fail in 10, 15, 20 seconds. So I'm not turning back until someone tells me that I'm wrong. Yeah, we're building. I ran debug earlier and it changed the configuration, so it's changing it back to a normal build, and it's linking all the things. Linking is all of these includes and stuff, and what these things allow and disallow. That's what linking is doing. Look, intensives gem.editor.dll. That's what it's linking right now. So editor gem.dll here. So it's doing this now that we've introduced it to the project. So everything is happening as it should. If you're using the regular build on Windows, you won't get this nice numerical following. It's just going to just pump out garbled mess for you. The nice thing about building is that once you've built stuff like this, like added this gem, you won't need to worry too much about it because it's going to make far less programming changes. So I terminate my build. I'm going to just show you really quickly before we proceed. I'm going to do a real cosmetic, enter and then backspace out and then save. So now that file is dirty. We're going to do another build. 4 steps, and it didn't have to look at all the packages before. So then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and usually at 1 or 2, it's going to tell you failed. You might not get the same performance with the standard arrangement. So it built. If I click build again, it's going to say no work to do. So we know nothing has changed. This is the full project is exactly as we're going to have it, built from source code and all those things. We're going to run the editor, and look, the project opens. It's exactly the same as being in this window and making the project open. Not quite exactly, but very much exactly. So here we are. We've got our standard opening. Go to the default level. Hopefully, we'll see this. Look. So we have the folder GSPlay gems. This is your dev gems. And we have intensives gem, which is the gem we just created. So an interesting thing, because you're not doing programming in the editor, like you have to close the editor, build, and then reopen it, the code folder just vanishes. But, if you're making prefab for your gem, you can just make the prefab, put it in assets, and now whenever you plug your gem in, no matter the project, you'll have the assets folder. And so then you can just drag your prefab onto it. So let's create entity, prefab sample, create prefab. Intensives 2025 is our project. So then we go to our gems folder, we go to intensives gem, we go to assets, and we save. Now we've got prefab sample. We can get rid of this guy. And if we look in here, double click, we've got our samples. So, if you have a very common prefab part of a thing, maybe you even have a gem that's just assets and just prefab things, you can just drag it in, do whatever you want with it. And this is what gives the gems such a powerful ability to be deployed. You're not installing things. You don't have to wire all the things up here. All you do is you just turn on the gem. And if you've built it in the past correctly, the editor will open, you'll have your assets, you'll have your components. We don't have any to show yet. And you'll be able to build your C++ in your gems. So I think that's the entirety of the gem stuff. Quick review. We made a gem. We looked at how you set the meta of the gem. We were looking at the targeting of the package is, showing you how the different packages mean different things, both editor and regular play mode, but also the difference between API private and shared. We looked at these Cmake builds of where you're going to add the source code that you're saying exists here in the gem. The include source folders. The include is the one that you usually point at, and the source is usually the stuff that points at things in the include, and then runs and actually does the run. And then the module This module here is how you finally tell the editor, hey, this code that we've made here exists, and you can actually use it to make gems and, components and systems and files and system components, and this is the thing that gives it to the editor. So we did all that. We have our gem. It built successfully. We ran the editor successfully, and we know we did it, and the gem exists because it's here in our directory. You can click into intensives, and this is the project folder. So thanks for coming. I hope this gives you a lot more understanding on what exactly a gem is and why it matters that we know that. And the next coming up tutorial will be components. So check that out, and thanks for coming.